Yo, what the hell is up? Welcome back to Reviews with Jake, where I just got done watching Late Night with the Devil. Before I dive in, let me just start by saying I am truly loving the low-stakes, laid-back approach that I've decided to handle this with. I haven't done a review since mid-February, and I have felt zero pressure to compromise and see any of the movies that have come out since that I really wasn't that interested in watching. Especially since the last month and a half I have largely spent on the road, a lot of traveling for work, and I am really glad that I didn't fill that precious time at home with feeling like I needed to do this. It really was quite liberating. But that said, with great travel comes great hope that the destinations that we're going to are going to have cooperative weather for us to enjoy the new locales while we're there and not shooting. Usually we've gotten pretty lucky in that regard, up until this last trip to Tampa, when we got there and 2 days were very sunny and nice, while the other 2 were rainy, cold, and windy. Our last night there was pretty miserable outside, so my coworker and I had to think inside the box, find an inside activity to spend our last evening. We found a movie theater that happened to be playing a title that was not playing at our hometown, this one, and we were both pretty curious about it. Did we feel guilty about spending our last night in Tampa, Florida in a movie theater, especially when back home was getting dumped by another couple extra inches of snow? Absolutely, but that's what we did, and it felt right in the moment. A 10 p.m. late night showing of Late Night with the Devil in the home of the Devil Rays. I mean, come on, how could you not escape the rain in that fashion? What I truly loved most about this film was the premise. I mean, you read the synopsis of this film and there's so much to really get excited about. Yes, you've got your usual run-of-the-mill exorcism story that we've all seen 1,000 times, but you paste that in an interesting locale, time, and situation. It makes it all the more juicy and so many fun toys in the sandbox to play with. And that 70s setting really amped up the appreciation value for me. It really transported us with the set designs and the wardrobes back to the prime era of the late night talk show. It was a lot of fun. I'm so glad that they elected to do this particular premise in the 70s, because no one frankly watches any of that shit anymore, so it would not have worked. But to transport it back to this era where late night talk shows were all the rage, it was brilliant. But with the selection of this era, they had to pony up the extra money to get meticulous with the hair, the wardrobe, the sets, the production value of the program, all of it. It was a package deal, and I thought for the most part they pulled it off. It wasn't perfect, but we'll get to that. Finally, I really enjoyed a few of the key performances, particularly that of David Dastmalchian and Ingrid Torelli. David Dastmalchian plays the lead of this film, the talk show host of the program that's being haunted by the exorcism, and I am really happy to see him getting opportunities to lead a film, not only because he is tremendously talented, and I usually really enjoy him in the films that he's in, but also he just seems to be a very easy person to root for ever since I've seen the peek behind the curtain of his personality when he's made guest spots on Fat Man Beyond's podcast with Kevin Smith. He deserved this opportunity. I thought he did a good job with it, balancing both his usual trademark uneasiness and panic and paranoia, but also with a layer of charisma that a talk show host needs, and balancing both of them as all hell is unfolding all around them on set. And Ingrid Torelli, I had never seen her before. I'm not familiar with her previous work, but I thought she did a great job taking on the challenge of being the possessed girl on the TV program. Most of the time in movies like this, that particular role kind of has the weight of the whole success of the film kind of hinging on it, and I thought she did a good job. However, for me, that is where the acing ends, because I unfortunately found this film to be frustratingly flawed. Yep, that's right, it's rant season. Strap in, I've got a lot to say about this one, but before I dive in, you should know that I'm going to try and keep this spoiler free. I'm not going to dive into any plot points or anything, but I will say that I'm going to dive into a lot of gray area, particularly on the production side of the film. This movie rather fittingly found itself in purgatory between two extremes in several topics, which made it feel really lost. For example, I personally really love the premise and the shtick of this film, the live TV broadcast, but they did a very bad job committing to it fully. In the beginning of the film, we're given a massively long exposition dump. I'll get into that later, but before the movie actually starts and the exposition ends, we're given a narration that basically says somewhere along the lines of everything you're about to see is a combination of what aired that night on TV as well as some lost footage. They call it lost footage or lost tapes or something like that, which basically tells us, the audience, that the entire duration of the hour and 20 of this movie is basically a found footage film told through all the cameras and microphones that were on the set. Which is fine. The live TV broadcast that they have going on was by far the most interesting aspect of this film. And when they focused on that, I thought that it really worked and it was a lot of fun. But they break from it so often, particularly during the commercial breaks where the folks at home are starting to see commercials. We start to see what I think are those lost tapes that the exposition dump warned us about. And what are the lost tapes? Well, it's basically just clearance for the camera to just turn to grayscale, and that's the ticket for it to go wherever the it wants. It's no longer just the cameras that are on set on the studio floor. It's just floating around all backstage with multiple camera angles for conversations and perfect audio. I mean, it's just so hard for me to buy the shtick when they're doing stuff like that. Yes, these scenes are integral for this film and this story to work. We needed them to get that extra meat on the bones, but don't try and tell us that these are lost tapes or whatever, like this is actual footage that these cameras captured, when it is impossible for this footage to fit under that umbrella. You're gonna have to try a little harder than that. Hell, even at the end of the film during the conclusion, again, no spoilers, but it basically just cuts to regular HD colored perfectly crisp video. Are we supposed to believe that that too is part of the lost tapes? How did this footage get captured? And even during the broadcast itself, I hate to be nitpicky, but the footage did not look like that of 70s production value. The footage was way too crisp, had a lot of great depth of field. It just looked too good. It looked like they put a really weak ass filter on it, but it just didn't really look as good as like movies like the VHS franchise or Sinister, even for that matter. There are ways to make the footage look more of that of the era, and they just didn't do that. Not to mention that, as well as just the sheer fact that it seems like there's a million cameras allegedly on this set to get all the perfect angles to cut to when hits the fan. You got like 5 or 6 different people on the stage that all have a devoted close-up camera somehow. You got a camera already aimed at the rafters at a moment's notice when something flies up there and something happens up there. And then you got a dude doing some hypnotizing shit that somehow has like 3 different cameras on him from all different angles. I mean, if you look at this, the way that the film is cut and some of the angles that they get, you'd be made to believe that there were like 20 different cameras on the set, when in reality it should have just been like 3 or 4 for this era. That's probably all the cameras that they'd have on set. That's all we see behind the curtain. When they show a wide shot of the set, we only see like 3 cameras. I just wish they were just a little bit more methodical about their shot selection. Is this something that most people are not gonna care about or notice or mind? Absolutely. But for me personally, and that's who's in front of the microphone right now, I do this for a living. And you're gonna have to try a little bit harder than that to turn off my suspension of disbelief when you tell me that everything in this film is all some sort of live broadcast or lost tapes as such. I personally think they should have just got rid of that notion from the get-go. Just let this movie mix and be filmed freely. Have the 70s broadcast, and when it cuts to commercial, just go to regular video. Why wouldn't you? Just get rid of the grayscale. It's not fooling anyone. Just have 2 distinct visual styles, the 70s and then the regular. There's no reason that all needs to fit in this box of it all being the found footage broadcast lost tapes. I've seen the movie. I know where it goes. And there's no reason that this film needed to be told in that format exclusively. Now, that's only if they really thought that this movie and premise needed a story to match it. I personally don't think it's a necessity necessarily, but clearly they thought so. Like I said before, this movie starts with a massive exposition dump, giving us a lot of subplots and character and relationship complexities that you feel like this movie is gonna grow into something, but then at the end of the runtime, just didn't really do anything. It wasn't needed. I personally think they should have either cut all of that out and made this like a 30-minute film with just the broadcast, lean into the shtick and the premise, and just have a lot of quick, fun, disposable fun with it. Or B, keep all of that stuff in there, but give these subplots a little bit more to work with to make them actually feel consequential in the end. I also personally struggle with the tone of this film. For the most part, it's very straight and serious, but every now and then a few jokes slip through, but not like good jokes that felt methodical or anything. They just felt kind of awkward in delivery, almost like the actor just kind of said it, kind of thinking it would end up in a blooper reel or the cutting room floor, but then they ended up into the final cut, and it just, I don't know, it's just weird comedy. I also didn't really enjoy the ending of the film. I'm not going to dive into it again, but I found it very underwhelming. It really felt like they were trying to achieve 2 different extremes. You have your character-driven, cathartic ending, and then you also have the balls-to-the-wall banger ending. They were trying to do both, but ultimately ended up not hitting either. The big swing ending didn't work because of the limited budget, and you're just waiting for something big to happen, but they just didn't have the dollars to make it so. Meanwhile, on the character side of things, that that also ended with a whimper because they didn't give the aforementioned subplots the amount of water that it needed. I was putting a lot of stock into the ending of this movie. Halfway through, my coworker leaned over and asked me, "What are you thinking so far?" And I said, "We'll see," because I was seeing a lot of frustrating things happening, but I was going to be willing to forgive them if they stuck the landing, and they just did not, in my opinion, which was crazy disappointing. All in all, I think the word disappointing kind of sums it up for me. I see like 7 different movies that aren't overwhelmingly different from each other, and then we have this one, and I like all of these way more than the one that I got. I personally think this movie should have been way shorter or way longer. Either cut out all the BS and make it shorter and fun, or you just give all of these subplots the time and attention that they deserve to make them work. As an hour and a half or so movie, I don't think that this movie or story works. In fact, like halfway through the movie, I remember thinking that this movie feels really long, which is crazy to say about a movie so short. I really wanted to love this movie a lot more than what I did, but it's so hard for me to overlook some of these glaring flaws and not think that they squandered the potential for a really cool movie. That said, I'm seeing a lot of positive reviews for the film, as well as my coworker who enjoyed it a bit more than I did. Maybe I'm on an island for this one. So maybe you can watch this one and have a lot of fun with it, or you can end up like me and have technical difficulties. At an hour and a half time investment, I think it's at least worth a watch. Why not? Low stakes, low risk, but I certainly wouldn't rush to the theater to see it, especially if your hometown theater does not have this movie. Don't go to Tampa for it. I imagine this film's going to be streaming within a couple weeks or a month or something like that. I'd check it out there. In fact, watching it at home on your home TV set with a premise and a shtick like this, that feels like what the good Lord intended for it. But that is just me. What do you think? Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe to this channel to stay up to date with new reviews coming real soon. Stay safe. Thanks for checking in.